pack struggles to rescue Scott, and Peter is revealed as the big bad guy. Hello, entertainment enthusiasts. This is Ray, and this is the Fandom Realm. Today, I am covering number 6 on my Teen Wolf countdown. This is called Smoke and Mirrors. It is from Season 4, Episode 12. As always, this is a spoiler review, so just keep that in mind. And I am going to be doing this review as I did number 7, so I'm going to have every topic listed. They're going to be mostly in order so that you can follow along, and then you can also use time codes to work your way through if you would like. So we're going to start off with topic number 1, and that is our cold open and seeing what's going on with Kira. She's in a cell. She is going to wake up. She's going to end up getting out of the cell. She's going to wander around until she runs into a berserker. She's assaulted by one that ends up being Scott. She realized Kate has turned him into a berserker. After she escaped the Calavaros, she was led to the temple and she found the berserkers waiting on her. She tells Kira that she found out that she could control them and then create them. She laments that Scott became an alpha without having to kill, so she has him come out and stab Kira to try to kill her. Moving on to point number 2, the pack's going to come together in order to try to find Scott. It looks like they are meeting at some type of airplane hangar. Liam is wanting to go, but Stiles wants him to stay behind because he can't control his change. Malia seems to be sentimental towards Liam going, but with the full moon, that could be very dangerous. They are joined by Derek, Peter, and Braeden, who reveals she was once a federal officer. We'll learn more about that later. Peter seems in a hurry to go, but Stiles says he needs to wait for Lydia. The group is uncomfortable waiting because time might matter, so Liam calls Mason to look for Lydia. Now, with this point, the biggest thing here is just, I love having the pack come together. You could see Stiles, you could see Liam. You know that Peter is up to no good just because of the way he is acting. And so I've always enjoyed this part of this episode. Point 3, Lydia is at school. She's trying to find something with a better scent of Scott so that they can track him a little bit easier. But as she is smelling a shirt, she's going to be attacked by a berserker. Mason searches the school for Lydia and finds some of her belongings on the stairs before coming face to face with a berserker. Mason's going to wake up from being knocked out, and he awakens with Lydia sitting there beside him, but their phones are gone. Lydia's going to tell him that the berserker isn't human. The biggest thing I liked about this scene is it started to get Mason more involved in the story. So I was glad to see him come out and really sort of start to step up and grow in this episode of Teen Wolf. On to point 4. On the way to Mexico, Derek has brought the Triskelion, the talisman that is supposed to help werewolves control the change during the full moon. He has brought it to help Liam. Now, Stiles knows that it doesn't really do anything, but they are going to try to help Liam by using it. As they're driving, Peter is actually in the van with Malia, trying to gauge how much support she is going to be. And he basically tells her that he might need her, but he's not real sure how much help she's going to be. Meanwhile, Liam is struggling with the full moon and begins to change. Derek tries to get him to use the Triskelion and saying Alpha, Beta, Omega to help him control the change. It's just the words and having control and saying them slowly that's supposed to help him, but it's not really working. Liam is close to almost losing control when Stiles thinks of Satomi's pack's motto, what 3 things cannot long be hidden: the sun, the moon, and the truth. Liam is going to recite this, and eventually he's going to get himself under control, and Derek and Stiles are gonna be relieved. Again, I've always liked the character of Liam since they brought him in, and just seeing him figuring out another way to control his shift, I thought was important in this episode, and that it was the saying that Satomi's pack used to control the shift. I thought that was very interesting. Of course, that was all brought in previous episodes. And of course, Stiles should have been a little bit concerned because, I mean, he was having to back away from Liam, and of course Derek was still werewolf, so he had some power and he could sort of hold him off, but Stiles would have been in some danger possibly. Moving on to point 5, we return to Kira, who has been stabbed by Berserker Scott. She is having trouble healing, and so she is actually going to be hallucinating that her mom is there giving her advice. Her mom tells her that foxes and wolves don't get along, but that there are similarities. And then Kira's mom asks her how wolves heal, and Kira realizes pain spurs the process. Kira breaks off of some of the rock, which is obsidian, and cuts herself, spurring her healing to take place. Not a lot to say on this point. I do like when the characters have hallucinations of their parents talking to them or friends talking to them to tell them what to do. You know, back in season 3, we had Allison's mom come in to help her save Scott when they went on that cross-country trip. And so I enjoy these type of, I call them flash-ins by other characters. And so also, we knew that obsidian was going to come into play later in the show. They made too big of a deal out of it. Point 6, the pack arrives at the temple at La Iglesias. When Derek opens the back of the van, when he opens the door, there's a berserker there standing, and the berserker attacks Derek. In the fight, Derek is going to be mortally wounded from a stab to the chest. The group is going to be shocked, including Peter. They're stunned, but Derek tells them to go save Scott. As they leave, Derek has a short moment with Stiles where he encourages him to go save Scott. It'll be okay. And as Stiles runs away to the temple, he looks back at Derek with that knowing sense of dread that Derek was dying. Braeden's going to stay behind with Derek as the rest of the group heads into the temple. This was sort of emotional. The biggest part of this scene that I thought really hit were two just looks, and that was the look that Peter gave when he realized Derek was probably going to die. It gave some feeling of regret, something you haven't seen much from Peter. Of course, him and Derek were really close, and so this would have hit him pretty hard. And then just that look that Stiles gave when he looked back, especially, knowing that that's probably the last time he was going to see Derek alive. Of course, they have done a lot in Teen Wolf to sort of match these two up and to give them sort of a special relationship, and you can see the character of Stiles sort of felt that relationship dying right there in front of him. But he went off to save Scott. Now, point number 7, the pack minus Derek and Braeden enter La Iglesias and begin the search for Scott. Stiles receives a phone call from his very angry dad, who threatens to hobble him when he comes back. Stilinski asks what he can do, and Stiles tells him to find Lydia and Mason, that he couldn't get a hold of Lydia earlier and Mason went to find her, and now he doesn't know what's going on, and that he might need more firepower to take out a berserker. After hanging up, the group is attacked by a berserker, and it is Berserker Scott. They do split up, with Stiles going off to look for Kira, and Malia and Liam fighting Berserker Scott. Peter's going to be watching on, like everything he wants is going as planned. Peter is eventually going to join in the fight. Meanwhile, Stiles finds Kira, who tells him that the berserker is Scott, and they won't know they are fighting him. Stiles points out that is why Lydia isn't there, because she would know it was Scott. So they race off to intervene. Not much really to say on this point as well. Just the idea that I like that phone call between Stiles and his dad. I think Stiles is growing up, and his dad has to realize this, and his dad is realizing he is off in a dangerous position again and risking his life, and he just wants him to be safe. And I think that's something that any parent can relate with when your kid is growing up and you don't have the control that you once had. And of course, Stiles figures out that the reason why Lydia wasn't there was because she would have been able to tell them that they were trying to kill Scott. All right, off to point 8. Braeden has stayed outside with Derek. She also realizes that this is a mortal wound, and while talking to Derek, he says he is feeling very mortal right about now. Braeden hears something coming and looks around the building to see a berserker and Kate walking down the street. Braeden fires relentlessly at them, but the berserker walks right through it and grabs Braeden by the neck. Kate comes up and asks her how much she was being paid, because, of course, she originally was being paid by the Calavaros to hunt Kate down. But before they could kill Braeden, the cavalry arrives. As the Calavaros drive up, so does Argent and Parrish, and they arrive and they force Kate and the berserker to retreat. Eventually, it's going to be fight or die for the berserker and Kate, and the berserker really starts to challenge the members of the Calavaros, and they are going to beat them back, and they do start killing some of the Calavaros. Braeden is going to make her way back to Derek, who dies. Now, everybody's got to love when the cavalry arrives moment. This was a big one. I loved the Calavaros coming up, Argent coming up, and, of course, Parrish. Just that scene of them coming in and how it was shot and the importance of it at that moment was really big. I really enjoyed that scene. And then, of course, there's the sadness of Braeden coming back and realizing and seeing Derek die. And I can remember when this actually happened, you sort of took a gulp in your throat, because you really thought, is Derek dead? There had been some rumors out there at the time that Tyler Hoechlin may be leaving Teen Wolf and he may die in this episode. So boy, this was something that had a lot of people on edge at the time. Moving on to point number 9 here. Lydia and Mason are in the gym, and Lydia goes over to a rack of baseball bats, and it looks like field hockey sticks, and she picks out a bat. She's going to attack the berserker. Her friends are in trouble, and she has to do something. She is going to actually move towards the berserker, but basically at that time, Mason is finally going to find his courage, and he's going to grab a bat, and he attacks the berserker. Doesn't go well for him, as he gets knocked back. Lydia does the same thing. She gets knocked back as well. However, the day is going to be saved as Sheriff Stilinski arrives. He yells at the berserker. He throws it an explosive, and as he dives behind the wall, he ignites the explosive, and the berserker blows into a bunch of pieces. As the sheriff, as Lydia, as Mason get together after the explosion, Lydia is going to explain that they are trying to kill Scott. Only thing I really have to say here, well, 2 things. Mason finally stepping up. He really got his courage here. He's sort of set in the background. You know, Mason, when he came into the show, he was sort of Liam's Stiles, okay? Stiles is to Scott as Mason is to Liam. And so we've been waiting on that moment for Mason to really step up, and he did that in this episode. And then, of course, bringing the explosives to blow the berserker up and then throwing it to him, and the berserker caught it. Brilliant. Love that. Now, off to point number 10, the battle inside with Scott intensifies, and the group gains the upper hand. And just as Malia is about to strike the fatal blow, Stiles and Kira show up, and Kira slices the dagger that Malia is using. And Stiles explains that the berserker is actually Scott. They continue to fight, and Berserker Scott gets Liam by the throat and up against the wall. Liam's going to tell him that he's not a monster, he's a werewolf. Like he is, like Liam is. This is echoing the words that Scott told Liam earlier in the series when Liam was having issues turning. I don't remember exactly what episode it was, but Liam was having issues not wanting to be a monster. That's what he thought a werewolf was. And when Scott was finally able to get him calmed down, Scott looked at him and said, "You're not a monster, you're a werewolf like me." And so that was a very important point in the earlier episode. So they brought that back here as well. Scott's going to change and tears off his berserker gear and confronts Peter because, as Scott says, Peter is the only one who knows as much about berserkers as Argent does. Peter says that Scott stole his family's power and he was there to take it back, and the two are going to get into a fight. Peter is going to have the upper hand through most of the fight. Scott really doesn't seem to want to take that step to where he can't be beaten. That is until Peter threatens Liam. He throws some kind of type of bench or chair or something at him. And finally, Scott stands up as the true alpha, and he's going to kick the crap out of Peter, telling Peter at the end that Peter was never an alpha, he was a monster. And then he's going to land one final punch, knocking Peter out. Must say, with this point and what happened during this part of the episode, very exciting. This is what we've all been waiting for, going all the way back to season 1, is this showdown between Scott and Peter. Of course, up until this time, a lot of people, a lot of fans of the show, been questioning Scott being a true alpha because he never really showed alpha type power. And so basically, Scott went all Matrix Alpha Werewolf in this episode and just outclassed Peter. Once it got to that point, there was no way Peter was going to win. And of course, Scott knocks him out at the end, as everybody, of course, is watching on. And I loved how they finished that scene. Now, on to point 11, getting close to the end here. The battle outside rages on as the berserkers and Kate have turned the tide, and bullets just aren't working. And they're starting to run out of bullets. And lots of people are getting killed. Kate's going to come for Mama Calavaros as a wolf howls. Everyone looks to where Derek's body was lying, but he isn't there. And a black wolf jumps over the crumbled wall. Derek has evolved and transformed into a wolf, like his mother, Talia. He attacks Kate and forces her back and transforms back into a human and destroys one of the berserkers. Kate flees, but is shot with yellow wolfsbane by Argent, who follows her into a cave where she blames Scott for Allison's death. But he tells her Allison died protecting her friends. What would Kate die for? She flees when Argent is unable to kill her, partially because he's out of ammo, partially because, well, she is his sister. Looking at this point, this was where lots of people probably stood up and cheered when it turns out Derek did not die. He just evolved and transformed into a wolf, and that wolf saves the day. That's a little bit out there for me in this episode. It was one of those things that, you're like, okay, that wolf is gonna have that much power against Kate, and then of course he transformed back before he used his power to kill the berserker. But I love the idea of having him sort of carry on the family legacy that his mother had, especially since we've never gotten to see Talia very much outside of basically just one episode, which, by the way, that episode is coming up in the next few weeks in my top 5. And of course, the question was answered, could Argent really kill Kate? And the answer was no. And of course, she gets away. This was something we probably could have guessed a long time ago. I just don't see him ever pulling that trigger that finishes her off. Calavaros might do it at some point, but I don't see where Argent would have. Now, on to point 12, our next to last point here, and the fighting is over. Everyone gathers in front of La Iglesias, and we find out that Peter has been dosed with enough yellow wolfsbane to put him out until they get home to Beacon Hills. We find out that Argent is going to help the Calavaros find Kate, as he has made a deal with them to protect Scott, and he made that deal months ago. Derek is going to be shown talking to Braeden, and he actually asks her if she really was a federal agent, and she admits that she was, but she became obsessed with one case involving the Desert Fox, who we know actually is Malia's mom. Not a lot going on with this point. The biggest things here was the fact that we knew from, I think it was last season, Argent basically had probably made a deal with the Calavaros to help find Kate. Of course, he didn't exactly know it was Kate at the time, but that comes later. And then, of course, they used the conversation between Derek and Braeden to set up the search for Malia's mom, which is going to come in the future of Teen Wolf. And so with that, point 12, not a lot happening, but we got some information for the future. Final point, this is 13. Back in Beacon Hills, Peter is locked up at Eichen House with a prisoner named Dr. Valack, who is going to reveal a third eye to Peter. Peter's going to be freaked out by this, tries to escape. Of course, he was acting all big and tough, but the cells at Eichen House have wolfsbane. They have mountain ash, so you're not able to break out. And so once that scene is over, we're going to flash forward and see Liam, Stiles, and Scott in the locker room talking to Coach, trying to get out of trouble because they missed practice while they were in Mexico. Finally, Coach tells them that Liam is the best talent he has seen in ages and that they have to watch out for each other. The episode's going to end in the classroom with Kira talking to her mom. Her mom hands her something that's wrapped up, and when it's revealed, it looks like a ninja throwing star. It was made by her dad out of the obsession obsidian that she used to injure herself in the cave. She had kept some of it. And Kira's mom asks her what it is, and Kira identifies it as her first tell, and the episode ends. Biggest things here, of course, Dr. Valack being revealed and the third eye. Really, knowing what I know now, I don't think this was as important as they wanted it to be. I didn't think he was used really well in the later episodes, and so I thought that was maybe a little waste here. Having Coach is always funny. Seeing that relationship, especially between Liam, Stiles, and Scott, grow. I like that. And of course, Coach knew shenanigans were going on and just sort of let it go. And then, of course, with Kira and her tell, you knew when she took that obsidian. You knew when she had to use that obsidian to make pain that was going to be important for some reason. So it did not surprise me that it actually is what they used to make her first tell. Now, with that are the 13 points and my reactions to those points out of this episode, Smoke and Mirrors, Season 4, episode number 12. I really did enjoy this episode. It is ranked number 6 for me. It's one that I really enjoyed, probably the most because of Scott actually fought like an alpha and kicked Liam's growth. I really enjoyed that. And then just this whole Derek transforming as well into the wolf and not being dead. That was very high on my list. So this episode easily made it into my top 10 list. It was never outside of the top 10 when I was looking over everything. All right, everybody, I hope you enjoyed this review and reaction. I hope you've been enjoying the reviews for the Teen Wolf Countdown as it has gone. We are only about 5 weeks away from the release of the Teen Wolf movie, so we're getting there. And next week, we will, of course, have start with the top 5. So, subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment below. And I'll see you next time on the Fandom Realm.